It's meme time, it's meme time. Gather all your friends, it's meme time. It's meme time, it's meme time. The only cure for sadness.
Sky Island Saga, Skypiea Arc. The crew ended up floating on the cloud after passing through it, and as they took in their surroundings, Usopp decided to take a swim in the clouds. When he didn't resurface, the Straw Hats realized he was falling all the way to the blue sea, and Luffy quickly stretched his arm down to try and save him. Robin sprouted eyes on Luffy's arm, allowing her to see where Usopp was and generate arms off of Luffy's to grab him. When Luffy pulled Usopp back up, a giant balloon-like octopus followed him, though Zoro easily dealt with it. As the crew recovered from this experience, they were suddenly assaulted by a masked gorilla warrior who landed powerful blows on Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji. However, the Knight of the Sky, Ganfall, then came flying in on his bird horse, Pierre, and fought off the warrior before introducing himself to the Straw Hats. After learning about what the Straw Hats did to go here, Ganfall gifted them a free whistle to call him should they be attacked by someone again, and then departed. With the crew unsure as to how to keep sailing upward to the log post's destination, Luffy tried to blow the whistle but was stopped by Nami. The crew then came across a cloud waterfall, and Luffy found that clouds around it were hard enough to stand and bounce on. Upon climbing up the bouncy cloud, Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper found that behind the waterfall was a path. At the end of the path, the Straw Hats came to Heaven's Gate, where the gatekeeper, Amazon, charged them 1 billion X-Dollars for entry. The Straw Hats only had Berry and were unsure how to convert it, but Amazon then told them they could pass through without paying. When they did, the Merry was suddenly seized by Speedy Shrimp, which took it and the Straw Hats on a winding path to the country of Skypiea up above. Upon reaching the sea at the end of the path, the Straw Hats found themselves at the coast of Angel Island, a place founded on top of clouds, and Luffy immediately disembarked to explore it. As Luffy examined the various elements on the island, the Straw Hats met a young native girl named Konis, as well as her father Pagaya. Luffy rode Pagaya's wave around the sea, but ended up losing control and falling in, forcing Zoro and Sanji to rescue him. Nami then tried out the waver and was much better at it, and Pagaya and Konis took the rest of the Straw Hats to their home. There, Konis explained the abilities of dials, which powered wavers among other things. At that point, Nami was no longer in sight, and Konis became worried that she had wandered over to Upper Yard, the home of Skypiea's god, Enel, which was forbidden for all to enter. This made Luffy very interested in it, and the crew decided to go and rescue Nami if she was in any trouble. The group went back down the coast, and before the Straw Hats set off, Pagaya examined their old waver. Suddenly, McKinley and the White Berets came marching in and confronted Luffy to charge him and the Straw Hats for illegal entry. They explained the punishment was just a fine of 10 times the original entry fee, but after learning the value of X-Dollars compared to Berry, the crew realized that it would be an exorbitant amount. Nami then returned to the coast on Pagaya's waver, and after learning about the charges, she hit McKinley with the waver in anger. Because of this, McKinley increased the charges against the Straw Hats to be punished by execution by cloud drifting, and Luffy confronted the White Berets with the intention of fighting. After dodging the sky arrows they shot, Luffy pulled against a palm tree and spun himself around, allowing him to wildly attack the force with punches and kicks and take out most of them at once. Zoro and Sanji came ashore to finish the job, and McKinley then proclaimed that due to their crimes, the Straw Hats would be judged by God's priests themselves. With this news, the Straw Hats bid farewell to Konis and Pagaya and prepared to try to leave Skypiea through Cloud End to the best of their ability. However, as Luffy, Usopp, and Sanji went inside the duo's house to get food, a Super Express Speedy Shrimp then arrived and carried off the Merry. Pagaya revealed to the trio that their crewmates were being taken to the sacrificial altar on Upper Yard, where they'd be held hostage. It would be up to the trio to take the Milky Road to Upper Yard and face the trials there in order to rescue the rest of the crew. Konis took Luffy, Usopp, and Sanji down Lovely Street to the port, where she gave them her small boat, Karasumaru. Luffy noticed that Konis had been pale and shaking since they had left her house, and asked if she was scared. After some hesitation, Konis broke down and revealed that she was the one who called the Speedy Shrimp that took away their crewmates, as failing to turn in criminals was punishable by death. Luffy, Usopp, and Sanji weren't angry at her for doing this, instead wondering why she risked her life to reveal it to them. Suddenly, sparks rose in the air, and Luffy quickly grabbed Konis and jumped away right as Enel struck the spot where Konis was standing with a giant thunderbolt. The attack left a gaping hole in the port that Luffy and Konis fell into. But luckily, Ganfall came flying in to save them. Ganfall took Konis away to a safe area as Luffy, Usopp, and Sanji set sail for Upper Yard. As the trio entered the heavily forested place, they quickly had to contend with large swinging blades threatening to pulverize them, as well as a giant sky lamprey eel. After making it past those obstacles, they arrived at 4 gateways, each one leading to a different ordeal. Luffy wanted to go to the ordeal of balls since it sounded the most fun, and so the trio went through the gate. After being dropped off a cliff, they landed back on the Milky Road and found themselves surrounded by large floating balls balls made of island cloud. However, when playing with one of the balls, Luffy and Usopp were assaulted by a snake that burst out of it, and Sanji tried hitting away an incoming ball only for it to explode. The trio were then confronted by Satori, one of Enel's 4 priests, who introduced them to his surprise balls and said they had to defeat him to continue on to the sacrificial altar. Luffy attempted to punch Satori, but the priest easily dodged him before striking him with an impact dial, which unleashed a powerful blow against him that caused internal damage. Satori sent Luffy, Sanji, and Usopp off the Karasumaru with his impact dial strikes and revealed that the boat would keep moving and leave them behind in his forest if they didn't defeat him in time. Luffy aimed another punch at Satori, but the priest grabbed his arm after dodging it and slammed him into a tree. Luffy then tried attacking Satori with Gomu Gomu no Gatling gun, but this failed to hit Satori and instead struck several surprise balls, causing the Straw Hats to be assaulted by their contents. Luffy was sent falling toward one of the cloud rivers and saved himself by grabbing a vine, though ended up having fun swinging on it and became distracted. Eventually, Sanji got him off the vine and beat him up, but Satori then struck Sanji with an impact dial. Satori proceeded to overwhelm the entire trio before assaulting them with his ball dragon, which would cause a massive chain reaction if a particular ball in its chain was set off. However, Luffy found the string Satori was using to control the dragon and broke it. Satori responded by pulling the rope to bring Luffy to him. However, Luffy didn't let go of the ball dragon and sent it crashing into Satori. The priest managed to avoid the massive explosion, but Luffy avoided it as well by hanging onto his back. Luffy then wrapped his arm around Satori's body, rendering him immobile and preventing him from dodging their attacks, allowing Sanji to give Satori a powerful kick to the head and defeat him. Immediately afterward, Usopp called to Luffy and Sanji that he had found the Karasumaru and told them to come to him quickly. Once they did, Usopp shot a rope from his belt that successfully wrapped around the boat and pulled them up to it, but they ended up hitting several trees on the way up. As the Karasumaru sailed out of the forest, the trio lay dazed on it. Sometime later, Luffy, Usopp, and Sanji sailed through a field dotted with skulls. A group of Shandia gorillas then came flying past them, and their leader, Wiper, fired a bazooka shot at the trio. Luffy deflected it with Gomu Gomu no Fusen, and Wiper chose not to attack further, but warned the Straw Hats that he would treat them like Enel if they had caused trouble on the island. The trio continued sailing and made it to the sacrificial altar by sunset, where they reunited with the rest of the crew. After checking on the injured Gonfall, the Straw Hats decided to camp out on Upper Yard for the night. After setting up on the campsite, the crew talked about their discovery that the lost city of gold that Noland was looking for was here on Upper Yard, and decided to hunt for the gold the next day. The crew then gathered food and supplies for the next day, and Luffy was put in charge of overseeing the boiling of water for drinking. As the Straw Hats ate some stew, they talked about clues to find the city from Noland's logbook. Afterwards, Robin said the crew should put out the fire to avoid attracting attention from enemies, but Luffy and Usopp opposed this. Despite Robin's and Nami's warnings, the crew built a giant bonfire and danced around it before going to bed. The next morning, Usopp showed the crew the repairs to the Mary somehow happened overnight, which he claimed to be the work of a spirit. The crew then split into 2 teams to head to the Lost City, with Luffy, Zoro, Chopper, and Robin forming the Explore team that would head to the city on foot. The quartet's expedition had just started when they ran into a giant snake named Nola. Luffy told the group to run away from it, and they became scattered as the snake attempted to attack them with its poisonous fangs. Luffy tried to lure Nola toward them, and ended up being separated from the rest of the group. He remembered the direction to go south, but had no idea which way south was, and went in a straight line southwest. He became interested upon hearing the bleating of what sounded like a goat, and when a Shandia warrior tried to ambush them, Luffy quickly beat the warrior aside, being annoyed that he was not a goat. Luffy then ran into Wiper, who asked him what he was doing on Upper Yard still. Wiper told Luffy that Upper Yard belonged to his people, the Shandia, and Luffy accepted this and walked off. However, Wiper had had enough of Luffy and so decided to eliminate him, and Luffy was very willing to fight back. Wiper shot Luffy with 8 bazooka shots, all of which Luffy deflected. Wiper then changed his strategy and fired a stream of natural gas at Luffy before using his burn bazooka to create disintegrating white flame. Luffy managed to dodge the sudden burst of fire and traded blows with Wiper in midair. Wiper then readied another burn bazooka strike against him, and Luffy responded by attacking him with Gomu Gomu no Bazooka. The 2's attacks hit the other simultaneously, causing a notable amount of injury to both of them. Wiper then called out to Luffy to see if he was still alive, and Luffy responded, but he was then suddenly eaten by Nola and fell through its insides before landing among some ruins. Thinking he was inside a cave, Luffy examined the treasures in the ruins while walking further down Nola's stomach. He came to a dead end and tried striking it with Gomu Gomu no Bazooka to see if there was a secret door, which caused Nola to spin around. Nola ate some sea clouds, which almost drowned Luffy, and the pirate continued hitting the walls of its stomach, which caused the snake to rampage through Upper Yard in pain. Nola's movements while fighting in the upper underwater ruins of Shandora caused Luffy to constantly fall through its stomach as it repositioned, leaving him aghast as to what kind of cave this was. Luffy then attempted to dig his way out of the stomach, causing Nola to laugh. However, he was then joined by Nami, Gonfall, Pierre, and Aiza after they had been eaten by Nola, and they revealed to him that this cave was the snake's stomach. Nami decided to ride her waver out of the snake through its mouth, and Luffy hung onto the back of the wave while Aiza hung onto him. However, the exhaust fumes of the waver blew Luffy and Aiza off of it, and they fell back down to Nola's stomach. However, Pierre quickly returned to rescue them. Nola was knocked unconscious by a thunderbolt from Enel, and Luffy, Aiza, and Pierre traveled up to its head. Luffy ended up behind its eye and opened its eyelid, but was quickly guided to its mouth. They jarred the snake's mouth open and fell down to the ground below, where they found themselves in Shandora, the legendary city of gold. However, Luffy and Aiza then found Zoro, Chopper, Robin, Gonfall, and Wiper laying unconscious next to a giant hole in the ground. A barely conscious Robin told Luffy that Enel had done this and was plotting to destroy all of Skypiea. He had taken Nami away to an unknown place. Robin believed that Enel would go to the fabled Golden Bell first, and when Aiza sensed the presence of two people with her mantra, Luffy told the young girl to take him there. Aiza guided Luffy to a cave near the city ruins, and Luffy confronted Enel, who was with Nami on the giant ship Arc Maxim. Luffy pulled himself up to the ship's deck, and Enel struck him with a mighty thunderbolt. However, due to Luffy's body being made of rubber, a natural insulator to lightning, the attack had no effect on him. Enel was left stunned, and Luffy charged toward him, successfully punching Skypiea's god in the stomach as his rubber body bypassed Enel's Logia defenses. When Enel got up from the attack, Luffy tried attacking him again, but the god used his mantra to dodge Luffy's attacks and hit the pirate with his staff. Enel used his electricity to reshape his staff into a trident, and Luffy struggled to avoid being stabbed by it. After managing to dodge one of Enel's attacks in midair, Luffy was able to kick him onto the floor. However, Enel was able to grab Luffy's arm on his follow-up attack and slam him into the floor as well, and he proceeded to activate the Arc Maxim to bring it up into the air. Luffy watched in anger as Enel used the Maxim to generate a giant thundercloud he called Deathpiea to wreak destruction on Skypiea, and the two then resumed sparring. In an attempt to work around Enel's mantra, Luffy shut off his mind and dodged Enel's strikes purely on reflex, though quickly went back to normal since he couldn't attack in that diminished mental state. Luffy then got another idea and ran toward Enel's throne chamber, which was surrounded by a curved wall. He threw rapid punches at the wall, and those punches ricocheted back and struck Enel, who couldn't anticipate the randomness. With Enel reeling from those attacks, he was powerless to stop Luffy from pummeling him with direct attacks. Luffy watched as the injured Enel slowly got up and cursed him for messing with his plans, but as Luffy moved to attack him further, Enel quickly responded by reshaping the gold from the wall behind him and forming it into a giant ball around Luffy's right forearm. With Luffy unable to pull his arm out of it, Enel kicked the ball and sent him rolling off the edge of the Maxim. Luffy tried holding onto the ledge, but Enel sent him falling to the ground far below with his staff. Aiza and Pierre tried to fly in to rescue him, but Enel attacked them with a lightning bolt. The three of them fell down into a chasm where Luffy had rubble fall on him, though he remained unharmed. After pulling himself out, he prepared to follow the Arc Maxim to a place where the Golden Bell was. Aiza took Luffy to the giant beanstalk Giant Jack, which the Arc Maxim was circling near, high above, and Robin was there, revealing that the Golden Bell was up at the top of it. Luffy then ran up Giant Jack with his golden ball in tow, intent on freeing Nami, Usopp, and Sanji and fighting Enel. Once he made it close to the top of Giant Jack, Luffy was noticed by Enel, who fired a lightning bolt to break off the top of the beanstalk and send Luffy falling. Luffy was able to grab back onto Giant Jack and pull himself onto the highest cloud platform on it, and right then he was suddenly struck by Nami, who had rode her waver up Giant Jack to fetch him. After watching Enel destroy all of Angel Island with a giant thundercloud called Raigo, Nami told Luffy that Usopp and Sanji had escaped the Arc Maxim and that he needed to go back to the Mary with her so they could escape. However, Luffy told her that he needed to defeat Enel and ring the Golden Bell for the sake of cricket, in order to show him that the City of Gold that Nolan wrote about was indeed real. Luffy tried grabbing onto the Arc Maxim, but Enel easily kicked off his hand, and Enel responded to Luffy's ensuing attempts by striking him with lightning bolts. Luffy then got the idea to write a message on the giant leaf to tell the people of Giant Jack's base to cut down the beanstalk so it would fall westward toward the Maxim. Luffy was surprised to see that Nami was sticking with him, and Nami told him that he needed her to pilot the waver the rest of the way up, and so she was willing to take that risk. Zora, Nola, and Wiper were able to successfully tip Giant Jack toward the west, and Nami drove the waver up the beanstalk as fast as it would go, while Luffy held on to her from behind. As the duo shot off the beanstalk and flew toward the Maxim, Enel brought down an even larger Raigo to destroy all of Skypiea. To Nami's shock, Luffy jumped off the waver directly into the Raigo, and while inside it, Luffy threw his golden ball around it in every possible direction. The ball conducted the electricity inside the giant thunder sphere, and so Luffy was able to completely disperse the Raigo and save Skypiea. With the Maxim and the Golden Ball now in his sights, Luffy stretched back his right arm and twisted it around. Enel responded by fully transforming into lightning in the shape resembling a larger version of his body, though Luffy was able to bypass his transformation and land blows on him. However, Enel was able to reach around Luffy with an arm of lightning and stab him in the back with his trident. Luffy's only options were either to let the trident pierce him further or fall back all the way down to Skypiea, and he decided to let go and fall. However, he then grabbed onto a small piece of island cloud near the Maxim and pulled himself back up. Luffy reared back and twisted his right arm again and sent the golden ball crashing into Enel's giant body, smashing him against the golden bell. Luffy cried out for the golden bell to ring, and as it did so, Enel's transformation deactivated and the god was defeated. Luffy fell down as it did so. Enel's transformation deactivated and the god was defeated. Luffy fell down along with Enel, the Maxim, and the bell, but landed on a small piece of island cloud where Nami was. Luffy and Nami jumped back down to Upper Yard, with Luffy using Gomu Gomu no Fusen to cushion their fall. They then came across the priest's storehouse and took the large amount of food from inside it before arriving at Shandora and reuniting with the rest of their crew. Night fell as the crew ate the priest's food, and then they took part in a large party with the Skypieans and Shandia. The party lasted for several days, and one night, when everyone was sleeping, Luffy woke the crew up and told them they should steal the city's treasure and run away. The next morning, Luffy took some of the crew inside the sleeping Nola's stomach, where they took the treasures from the ruins that the snake had eaten. The crew then anxiously waited for Robin to arrive so they could depart without being caught, and when Robin came with several Skypians behind her, the crew quickly ran away with their stolen treasure, not realizing the citizens had come to give them an even greater amount. The Straw Hats sailed to Cloud End, where they bid farewell to Conus and Pagaya. They were then sent off a ledge and fell straight down, but Conus called a balloon octopus which grabbed the Mary and inflated itself, giving the crew a controlled descent to the Blue Sea.
L is for lovers who love one another. A is for ass, of which I like to eat. U is for you're the only one for me.